Hello and welcome. We're going to read the story by Tobias Buckle, the contact breaker today for the new Streets of Capenna story. So there have been a lot of stories coming out at the same time. So I think we're doing it chronologically, but can never be too sure. Let's go. Most people take one look at someone like Barry and think head basher. But Barry's rise through the brokers has given him some more interesting assignments and more complex fights than just basic bashing heads. It's poor imagination that stops them from seeing the mind in that enormous head on those cable-thick neck muscles. Barry pulls up the tall, armored tips of his collar and ignores the whispers swirling in the dark light of the velvet-walled lounge around him. Broker, enforcer, watch out, Junash. You better get out of here. Barry has just ducked under the door frame to enter, careful not to catch his horn on the frame's varnished mahogany top. The padded door shuts behind him as he scans the lounge. He's not looking for Junash. Apparently a harried Avon with wings that droop sadly behind him as he runs out the back. Barry's here for a maniacal little street brawler by the name of Grant. There's security in the corner, 2 Leonin. Their brass engraved eyeglasses reflect the purple light enchanted into the form of liquid rope that's draped corner to corner across the lounge. Security's fuzzy ears flick towards Barry. They look relaxed but wary. Barry gives them the nod, muscle to muscle. He isn't here to be a problem, just looking. But the one on the left recognizes Barry, his ears flatten, and he bares his fangs. "Oh buddy," Barry rumbles, "that's a bad idea." Here in the Mezio, the lounges are neutral territory. All the families need to cut loose and relax somewhere, right? The cabaretti own most of the lounges though. That makes this place neutral-ish, Barry supposes. Barry wonders if these cabaretti bouncers are truly ready to come at the broker enforcer on an errand. Apparently so. The 2 Leonin split up and cut through the flashy dancers lost in the warm flush of each other's company as they rhythmically tap their feet against their partners and smile too widely at each other. The Leonin to Barry's left pulls out a loaded violin. Red light shimmers up and down its strings as the light catches it. For a moment, it's just the 3 of them. 2 Leonin, cat-like and towering over the dancers, shrinking away from them as they realize something's wrong. And Barry the enforcer, a rocks, grey and hulking, his tiny eyes examining the situation, his great single horn tilting as he smiles slightly. Barry raises his hands. "You gonna point that my way? All I've done is walk in. Haven't even had time for refreshment." "We know who you are." The bouncer on the right licks his lips, nerves. Barry can see the faintest ridge of fur standing up on the bouncer's neck. A small Weasley man darts around the varnished bar top and shoves his way through the padded double doors behind all the drinks. "There we are," Barry mutters. He takes a step forward and the 2 bouncers close rank in front of him. "You can't come in here after the customers," they say. "If you weren't hassling me, there'd be nothing to disturb your customers about," Barry says slowly and calmly. "I'm just passing through. Got a reputation to keep here." Barry knows all about reputations. He's been focused on the exit, following his target, but now he's paying all his attention on these 2 jumped up cats. Some people just couldn't leave well enough alone. These 2 have something to prove, and Barry, several steps ahead of them, knows that if he doesn't answer the challenge, word will get out that Barry's gone soft. Then things will get harder for him. From the gaudy, clouded park heights, balanced on their girders overlooking the city, to the Mezio where the lights danced up and down the swept lines of building facades, to the Caldea's halo smoke spewing stacks People were all just trying to get on with it. Hustle hard during the day, dance the night away. Barry's no different. He has a job to do, and these cats are getting in the way. A bead of light splits the wood paneling on the nearby wall to reveal a door concealed by magic. A craggy-faced elf in a dapper, metal-edged suit steps out, looks over at Barry, and then weaves through the crowd as if playing the smoothest game of hopscotch Barry's ever seen. Ari, Leonard, it's okay. Let him through. Great name for a cat, by the way, Leonard. The elf brushes the cuffs of his pinstriped suit and smiles at everyone. But mister, the elf's eyes flash. I hired the two of you because in a pinch you might, I repeat, might be able to stand against an enforcer, but I'm not paying to find out tonight. Leonin grumble a bit, but visibly back down. Barry nods at the elf and shoulders his way past the two bouncers. The buzzies say you're on the outs with the brokers. The bouncer on the right snarls. Rumors say that you've been adjudged a contract breaker. Something to do with the kid. You're soft. How long before an enforcer shows up to render a verdict on you, Barry? Other families have wiggle room, but a broker breaking contract? The other bouncer laughs. There is no room for interpreting those. You're washed up, Barry. Barry pauses right by the door. This is one of those moments, isn't it? Since Barry's fallen into a strange limbo with the brokers, he's been careful. No unnecessary mix-ups, no fights. But after all that laying low, Barry's feeling taut. Like something's been growing deep inside of him for the last few days and is ready to burst out. The Leonin have fixed him with all black eyes, pupils fully dilated. The ears are back, their bodies almost vibrating. Okay, time to pop this blister, Barry thinks. Good kitty, he says softly to the bouncer on his right, with a wink. Barry leans against the smooth limestone wall in the alley across from the lounge. He pats the inner pockets of his coat to check if an old, shattered pocket watch he's carried since his boxing days is okay. It's still in one piece. A flash of light makes him wince, and the young Leonin in a pinstripe vest walks out of the glare to stand by Barry's elbow as sparks fall to the ground and dance in the garbage. Rigo, Barry grunts. Rigo pats down her vest. She flicks a few errant sparks off with professional satisfaction, pushes a long swoop of her hair off to her right and flicks her ears. Heard there was commotion. I knew it would be you. The two bouncers asleep on the pavement over there. That you? Yeah. Barry spits blood into the gutter. The cold stone feels good against his head. He knows he's gonna have some serious bruises in the morning. Worse, one of the Leonin got a claw up under his suit and into his thick skin. He'll need to get that looked at. But word will get out that Barry's still a brawler and not someone to be tangled with. Rigo, her face pinched, fuzzy and broad, scratches her chin and chuckles. Canines flash. Feel better with that out of your system? I'll still catch up to Grant, Barry sighs. He turns around to look at the solicitor. Rigo's street smart has an ear to the ground with a network of street urchins. She knows how it goes in the alleys and shadows. It had to be taken care of. Rigo laughs. Can't help yourself, can you? Word will get out that I'm still more trouble to bother than it's worth. Barry changes the subject. You know where I stand with leadership? Tired of the grunt work assignments? Rigo chuckles and ignores Barry's request to share anything she might know. You shouldn't take it out on the bouncers. They're just to help, Barry. Barry grunts. He once saw Falco toss a man out the park height window. For months after that, Barry had been nervous about going up to the top of Nido Sanctuary to report to the boss. You can forget Grant, Rigo says. They sent some new kid to sniff him out. Grant's a heavy hitter. Barry took a deep breath, winced as his ribs stabbed at him. Kid'll be fine, Rigo taps an ear. Reports say he is doing his a bit. Barry reaches up to feel his left ear. The amplifier is still snug against his ear canal. whispering to him, but it's all static and muffled. He fiddles about with it, cursing his thick fingers. The words become distinguishable again. Updates, orders, calls for action. Once he'd been assigned Grant, Barry stopped paying much attention. The fight must have knocked it the wrong way around. Barry, wait for Rigo and further orders, the amplifier whispers, along with other orders for brokers in the street. Stand down, Barry, stand down. I've never been called off a mission before, Barry notes. Feels like a noose closing on him, if he's honest. Rigo shrugs. First time for everything. Not how it works with brokers. Letter of the law, order, everything in its place. From Falco on down, one could count on the brokers. Obsession with procedures. You're choosing now to worry about the letter of law? One of Rigo's thick eyebrows arcs with amusement. Don't worry. Didn't worry you when you bugged about that kid. Rigo pulls out a small vial of Halo and swirls it around in front of her face. Time to go. Barry feels a lump in his stomach, and it's not just from the bruises the Leonin left him with. Rigo is taking him back to Nido's sanctuary, back to face judgment. Falco's let him twist in the wind long enough, apparently. He could run right now. The brokers could send solicitors after him, but Barry's the meanest skull-cracking enforcer they have. They probably couldn't stop his escape. Probably. Barry steps forward. The glow of Halo casts dappled swirls of light around the alley, and spotlights dance in the sky overhead. Signs that the upper crust of Park Heights are out of having a good time. You haven't eaten anything recently, have you? Rigo checks. Just get this over with, Barry says, and the flash of white light envelops him as Rigo teleports them off to the headquarters. Art by Robin Olausen. Time to face the boss. Falco stands by the doors to the balcony where the wind tussles his feathers lightly. His wings loom over him, like supplicants that arc to hold the crown over a king's head. For an Avon, Falco dominates the room. By the way, art by Kieran Jenner. Barry gets a glimpse of how contract breakers must feel when he arrives, making a dent in the chatter and atmosphere as he takes up space with his muscle and bulky coat. I have a job for you, Barry, Falco says. No pleasantries, no greeting. No need for him to say it's an important one. The fact that he sent Rigo to deliver Barry here personally, that says everything. Falco steps heavily past winged metal patterns on the room's wall that glint with the light from the many upwardly aimed sconces. What about the boy? Barry asks after a long moment. Falco slams his fist into a nearby table. Contracts flutter to the floor. I'm giving you a job, and you want to ask about your failure? He's a child. Barry stands firm on the other side of the room, though his eyes can't help but drift to the big windows behind Falco's desk. Barry's seen people thrown out of him, defenestrated. This conversation could be a death sentence. But while a contract's a contract, fair is also fair. Have you ever seen what happens to a plane where orders fall apart? A plane? Are there multiple planes? Falco clasps his hand behind his back and walks forward. Barry swallows. He didn't know what he was signing. He was a child. That child sells newspapers across from a major Obscura meeting point. Barry doesn't flinch at Falco's fury. Falco's fury. You know what they do to someone spying on them, child or not. When contracts fail, the stitches that bind the plane together loosen and the fabric of society frays. Then it all comes down around us. Falco steps in front of Barry. You know the prophecy demands we hold the city together against what's coming. Are you turning your back to it? Barry looks down at his boots. I know we're going to need all those contracts and pacts cashed in. Every signed promise, every binding contract, all the whispers and pledges given in the dark, they are all for a reason. He doesn't understand all the ins and outs. He can't read. He can't make up out the tiny letters with his eyes, so he's always been grateful for the amplifier in his ear and the gossip around the fountains. Over the years, Barry's learned that something big is coming, that the brokers have been getting ready for years, building an army of obligations and promises that most of the pledges are magically bound to respect, even if those same spells hide that memory from them. Legions of people waiting to be activated, and most don't even know it. I haven't made a judgment on the case yet, Falco says softly, but I may have a way for you to prove yourself useful to the cause. I serve the law. Barry slaps his chest in a salute, then winces. We've banged so much Halo, even Ciatora noticed that the street supply is affected. She's worked hard to sniff out where it's going. Got a riveteer in her pocket that stole plans to the newest Halo honeycomb storage before we could fully wipe their memory. I think in some type of drugs or something. I'm sending Cross after him, but I want someone to go with, provide muscle. Cross? Barry sighs. He doesn't work with partners, and he certainly doesn't want Cross breathing down his neck, reporting every little mistake back to Falco. Art by Katerina Ladon. Cross informs me the riveteer's under a gag order, Falco says, but she has actual parchment plans. She might not be able to speak to anyone about them. She probably doesn't remember why she's on the run until he looks down at the plans. Then she understands what she has and starts running again. Go, find this contract breaker, get the plans back, leave the riveteer alive, but make them wish they're dead. Dump the contract breaker in front of the Treza so that Ciatora gets the message. Very intense. Even that dragon needs to know that you can't break a contract with us. A faint rustle in the air behind Barry tells him Cross has slipped into the room. So basically they're sending their two best people to fight another family. Every broker is a solicitor, all equal before the law, but Falco rules the family, and there are various other roles that need filled. Barry enforces contracts, and Cross styles himself as a ranger straight out of old Capenna. New Capenna, so there's an old Capenna, I haven't thought of that. Exploring the city's nooks and crannies. He finds the remains of forgotten places the family can use to set up aviaries that solicitors use as hideouts when needed. He starts out as a middleman though, a defense contractor who liked well-tailored clothes and receptions on balconies high above the city where big deals could be made on a handshake and a smile. Cross is probably standing in a shadowy part of the room, hoping to step out at the right moment in the faint haze of blue to startle Barry. He loves the flash and drama of it all. Seems like a cool commander too. That works on new recruits, green under the... That works on new recruits, green under the collar, not Barry. He's clocked Cross out of the corner of an eye. All trench coat and shiny, well-polished shoulder armor, high-end Leonin haircut carefully styled to rakishly fall back towards his shoulder. More flesh than substance, Barry feels. A real broker should have tarnish streaks from being outside, working contracts in the streets. There's a decision here Barry needs to make. Stay and wait for a ruling and find out just how doomed he is, or hustle and prevent the riveteers from figuring out what his family is up to. Maybe when he gets back, he'll find Falco inclined to rule favorably, or at least not murderously. Barry nods to where Cross hides in the shadows as he makes a decision. Let's go find us a riveteer, Cross. Sounds like time isn't waiting on us. When he turns, the sour look on Cross's face wipes away the exhaustion, making Barry's bones creak at the moment. I'm not happy about this mission either. Cross snaps as they take a car across the Maggio. Just another chitinous scarab-like vehicle dodging its way down the lanes of street between the swooping scaffolding of city skyscrapers that led to the grinders of Park Heights. The driver is a broker who keeps an eye on passenger conversations for the organization. Handy. Barry looks out a well-heeled crowd in line for a theatrical production standing on the corner of King Streets and Butchers. Drink this. Cross hands Barry an elixir as they cross a bridge that seems to float in the air. Barry's stomach flutters. He isn't one for heights, even if that's all New Capenna is. A city perched on girders, hovering over the land the people in it once walked. So many uses for Halo. Barry wonders about that a lot. How dependent has the city become on it in such a short time? I don't need. If you aren't tipped up, you aren't useful to me. This isn't any riveteer we're after. Jolene, she's a demolitionist. They call them bulldozers on Perry Street. Jolene could, no doubt, pull a whole building down on them if they aren't careful. Useful in the city, by the way. Art by Julian Koch, June Wen. You may have heard her called the Plunder Queen. We showed up to give her some legal assistance when she got herself caught breaking into a jewelry shop, vault. Thought an ironclad construction contract would cover us, but she's wilier than we expected. Barry, drink up already. Barry tosses back the elixir in a single swallow. He doubles over as the healing effect painfully reknit broken bone. At least his headache eases. He watches people in fedoras slouch down the streets and wonders about their lives. That one going home with bread tucked under his arm. Was that to a family waiting for their dad to finish the late shift at the factory in Caldaya? His coat glitters with halo effusions from the stacks. The driver takes them down a ramp, deeper into the bowels of New Capenna. By the way, it's an actual Beetle car. Where broker power fades further into the shadows. No gleaming corner offices down here. It's the industrial heart of the city. The foundry on which New Capenna sits that breathes for the city. The streets and lights above them now are where respectable families scheme and shake their hands on pacts made in their Park Height areas. But down here, the city's bellow labor day and night, groaning under the weight of structures above. Down here, work gets done, Barry thinks. Men in flat caps and threadbare shift clothes glare at the shiny insect panels on the vehicle. Barry and Cross stand out with their clean pinstripes. Carefully tailored armor inserts that evoke class and martial leanings, and the clear wealth of the personal transport. What are the chances we get jumped just for being down here in this rolling beetle of a machine? Barry grunts. I'm not wasting Halo on travel. I need to hold on to every little bit we can carry. We'll need it, Cross says. He taps the driver. The factory here. Several minutes later they stand inside the slumped girders of a rotting building. The stained glass windows feature cubist portraits of angels that stand on guard before a stylized impression of New Capenna's skyline. But a third of the colored glass has been shattered, likely by looters or vagrants, tossing rocks at them. Cross pulls a crowbar out of his jacket and levers a manhole cover open. In there, Barry looks dubiously down into the dark. Something smells bad down there, like it died, crawled down several blocks of city gutters, then slipped down a drain and died again once down there, and it's still dying. Cross, where are we going? Outside, Cross says. Ever been? Barry stares at Cross. The man has held the headline back from him. My mom's people, Barry says. They got in during the second exodus. The riveteers tightened it all up after that. Just heard stories. Mom still lives in the same dingy apartment down in the Verts, not far away from the basement rings. Barry got his start boxing in. The pulverizer, they called him. Printed it up on broadsheets plastered all up and down the lower parts of town. Simpler days, before death and misfortune, before Falco took him in. Barry misses it sometimes, but never misses being hungry all the time. The riveteer, she's down there? Barry eyes the manhole dubiously. They don't get along, like a pair of annoying siblings. Cross and Barry came up in the brokers together, running errands for the older grizzled solicitors. They could be a prank, Cross messing with him. The darkness on the other side of the manhole is emptiness, and maybe a faint shimmer of some leftover spell. And maybe beyond that, one could squint and see the old ruins of something that used to exist down on the ground before New Capenna. Cross buttons up his jacket and pulls on a pair of heavy gloves. Took me years to find this, but riveteers know more of them. They find weak spots during demolition or construction. Weak spots? Hidden tunnels, ladders, gaps in structure. Cross swings down the hole into the floor, into the dark. If it's a prank, he's fully committed. Art by Alan Paquette, meaning that this is a land, with an angel here. Some swampy stuff. I never heard anything over the amplifier. Barry drops slowly down, barely able to fit through the round hole, and kicks his feet around to find the ledge. He doesn't want to let go and drop forever. Cross grabs the back of Barry's coat and pulls him over. Solicitors Falco trusts, and that he told in person, face to face. They crouch on a ledge near the bulk of a city girder. A rusted set of ladder steps leads down and away into the dark void below. Down we go. Cross starts climbing down, and Barry eyes the steps warily, not sure if they'll hold the weight of a full-grown rocks enforcer. It's impressive if it can. Barry doesn't want to climb a ladder down to the ground his ancestors platform. The hammer slung over his shoulder clanking and banging against every other rung. He's had an hour to grumble about it all as an hour of ladder climbing, as they slowly make their way down. And Cross hasn't responded once, too focused on making sure he didn't get rust on his coat, Barry thinks. But if he wants to get back into Falco's good graces and get his life back to normal, Barry is going to have to push on here. Cross is one of Falco's most trusted advisors. There's a good chance, Barry thinks, that he can fix everything that went wrong. Because right now, there's not a single solicitor in New Capenna that will look at Barry without disgust on their face. He's broken a contract, it's as simple as that. What had he been thinking, crossing Falco like that? The Avon family boss is so unbendingly strict. Only the stupid and suicidal break contracts. Even other bosses make sure to follow the letter of Falco's law. Cross is the only hope for Barry's restoration. If he gives a good report to Falco, maybe Barry won't find out what it was like for an enforcer to be on the other side of an enforcement action. Barry shudders. He can't ever put himself in a position like this again. He should be knocking heads to collect debts, warning transgressors, and finding new contracts to bind to their legal needs. That is the way it's supposed to work. You're in a bad situation, things look grim, and there's a flash of white light near the commotion. A dapper-suited citizen sidles out of the shadows, asks if you need help, and offers to make it all go away. For a small favor, one you didn't even have to remember. Here we go, Cross mutters. Barry looks down to see the dark outlines of an ancient castle. The walls have long since fallen, slumped into a pile of rubble. The girder they're climbing down splits the castle in two, like a metal spear thrown into the structure's heart. When they let go of the last few rungs and hit the ground on their feet, Cross lightly and Barry with a solid thought. Cross smiles. Welcome to the old country. He seems at ease with all of this, but Barry squints as he looks around. Slumped rubble and old walls loom out of a passing mist that's sandwiched between the underbelly of New Capenna above and the ground below. Light from over a distant hill is just a thin sliver of horizon. Slivers are back, maybe? Can you track? Cross asks. Barry pulls a monocle from his breast pocket and settles it onto his right eye. Gauzy skeins of color weft about the ruins and cobblestones of the old plain. Faint sign, that way, Barry nods. It's a fresh trace, could be Jolene. The moment Jolene broke contract and ran, it sent up a flare, brighter than a spotlight outside the Grand Opera House. Broker solicitors would have been able to trace it easily with the right tools, like Barry's monocle. Down here, outside New Capenna, far from Nido's sanctuary, Barry has only the faintest smudge of color to follow. Cross has what looks like a pair of opera glasses in his hands. These are these things. I see it too. A short furry form dressed in a leather jacket steps out into the pocket weed-infested cobblestones. Raccoon folk. Barry glances around at the flashes of eyes in the shadows of ruined walls all about them. Cross. The man already has his hands up, and his gloves shimmer with blue light. There's a faint, arrogant smile on the edges of his lips. Not from the city, Barry mutters. Oh, he's not the one with hands up. The knee stabbers won't hold back. He guesses. There aren't unspoken rules about inner family dust-ups down here. These raccoon folk are feral, not like the chatty street urchins and the day laborers in the city above. And maybe that's why Cross has the ghastly grin on his face. Maybe that's what it takes to become one of Falco's inner circle. Hey there, buddy, Cross says in an even but somewhat curious tone. We're looking for a friend. He has a small portrait on paper. Cross holds the uncannily lifelike representation up in the air for the raccoon folk to see. Our friend, 20-furred, snarling and clearly starving raccoon folk, attack. Barry's been breaking kneecaps and bruising faces a long time, sometimes cracking limbs here and there. Regular city folk always worried about families tossing citizens out of the window, guide rides they called it. Truth is, it almost never happens to common folk, and there isn't that much brawling. Barry spends most of his time tracking, sniffing around for potential new contracts and walking the streets so that people see a broker enforcer out keeping order. As raccoon folk pour over them, Barry kisses the rings on his fingers for the first time in weeks. He hasn't even broken them out for the bouncers. Light plays across his hands into the shape of a brass knuckles. More light flows over his right fist to form a gauntlet, with tendrils of light running back up Barry's arms. You gotta embrace who the plane wants you to be, I guess. Barry grumbles and starts swinging. It's satisfying in a deep, animalistic way. Every punch connects, and he can feel bone give. With every meaty thwack, every crushing punch, raccoon folk scatter. They may have seen a Rox fight before, but they've never seen one radiant with the glow of magic like this. Barry isn't just a bruiser. He thinks of himself as a master tactician. He knows when to avoid the knockout so that he can drag a body in front of him as a shield. He can see the way the fight shapes up on old cobblestones as if watching from above. The raccoon folk regroup and swarm for another attack, looking only for the blood they can draw with knives and claws. And Barry is thinking 4 or 5 moves ahead. There's a leader here. There's always a leader. And if you watch the rhythm of a fight, spot where the gaps are and who they're protecting, you can feel the locus of power, like a spider sitting in the center of a web. It's a dance, and when the scrappy, scarred leader of their attackers suddenly realizes Barry isn't faltering or overwhelmed, but has been using open spaces and moments in the fighting to get closer to him, he panics and runs rather than ending up on the receiving end of Barry's fists. For the first time in days, Barry smiles widely. That had been a small war, and the lesser general had run for the hills. Quit gloating. We have work to do, Cross says from the shadow of a slumped wall. He cleans blood of a long dagger and tucks it away under his coat again. Barry's smile fades and he looks at Cross with enough raw malice that Cross fiddles with the edge of his vest. When you're ready. Barry sweeps his hand out like a butler indicating the way into a waiting room. Cross starts to take a step forward, and the entire wall he's been using as cover slumps down onto him with a horrifying groan. Rocks tumble out, mortar dust fills the air, and there's nothing more than a hill of hubris, debris, where the solicitor had once stood just a split second ago. Cross? Barry's somewhat stunned. Cross might annoy him, they might have years of almost sibling-like rivalry, but for the moment he can't move. Cross is fast, quick to spot any attacks, and is usually gone before his attacker understands what happened. Cross! Falco's not going to let Barry back up the broker command structure if he got Cross killed. Barry is now thinking about the more horrible things Falco might do to him, which is a mistake. The cobblestones under Barry's feet vibrate. Demolition magic. The road cracks open underneath Barry. No one ever expects the big brawlers to move too quickly, but Barry can sprint, and he moves now like his life depends on it, because it does. Rubble strikes his thick skin, knocking the breath out of him. Old boulders roll down the road. There's nothing but chaos and dust in the air as Barry forgets tactics or next steps. He's just whipping about in random directions to avoid getting crushed. Their prey knew they'd be coming, set up a trap. Probably told the raccoon folk where to find some soft strangers ripe for mugging. Barry has his eyepiece out as he tries to get out of defense and grab some of the initiative in the fight. Where is this damn riveteer? Too much chaos. It's hard to get a read, but his ears twitch. Footsteps? Art by Caroline Gariba.
I'm not sugarcoating. Just thought that you should know every time I close my eyes. You're the first place that I go in. I'm starting to notice all the reasons why you're taking me so high, baby now, baby now. Close the door for you. Give me an inch so I can take a mile. Wear me like I'm going out of style and stay here or leave. Whichever you believe is right. There's just a little bit of something here, a little bit of something, my dear. So I'll be as clear as I can. I'm not sugarcoating. Just thought that you should know every time I close my eyes. You're the first place that I go in. I'm starting to notice all the reasons why.
Barry arrows off the streets into the ruins of an old stable and inn. There's still a faint smell of horse in the air, even though it's been centuries since the old city was fully populated. There, a cough. The flying dust has irritated someone's throat. Even in a battle, little things like this are often the difference between victory and defeat. Barry pulls his hammer out from where it's awkwardly slung under his coat. He'll need it to face someone this powerful. The hammer hums with anticipation. Barry tightens his grip. His eyes narrow as he turns. His ears flicking with every tiny sound. His pinstripe suit is tattered and ripped. It flaps as he slams his hammer down the nearest wall. It might not be demolition magic, but the result is the same. Barry destroys the wall. The riveteers in the debris and dust has gauntleted, jeweled metal fists that glow. Barry catches the first punch, feels it shatter bones in his hand, and swings the hammer up. Jolene dodges, tries to grab at the hammer and hits him in the forearm with a magically charged punch that shatters his teeth. Barry headbutts her, she flies back and hits the wall. Gauntlets up, ready for him. Barry raises the hammer. We both swing at the same time. We can bring it all down on us. I know I can walk away. Can you? Jolene looks around at the walls and ancient, rotted beams. For a split second, she almost takes a step forward and starts the fight. Something blinks behind her eyes, a faint wisp of a spell. "You've got something that belongs to us." She says nothing, just waits, way too calmly. "Yes, she certainly does," Cross says from behind Barry. "Of course, he's not dead. Barry should be relieved. Falco won't call for an execution. Barry's chances of living through all of this just shot up way up. But he's still annoyed he's done the hard work as Cross." Barry glances at his old rifle and sees the blood dripping from a gash on Cross's head. The man isn't gliding gracefully out of the shadows. He's limping up to them. Every breath Cross takes is a rattle. Looks like Cross barely got out of that alive. But that's not all she got, Cross says. The air crackles with energy and forms as Cross throws coherent energy out into the air. Barry's expecting explosions or pain, but instead the veil of heaviness he hasn't noticed falls away, and Jolene gasps. She looks utterly disoriented. Obscura spell. Cross wheezes. He grabs Barry's shoulder to steady himself. "It's not the Riveteers." The Obscura would have sunk a ton of costly magic into forcing a Riveteer under their thumb like that. Barry shudders with sympathy, even though he'd been about to crack her skull just a split second ago. "I don't have the plans anymore," Jolene says. "Even under Obscura compulsion, I'm not that stupid." "Then I have questions to ask you." Cross whispers. He lets go of Barry's shoulder and wobbles forward. He barely acknowledges Barry, just drags a leg awkwardly past. His fingers glow with magic, a magical deposition. Barry shudders. "We have a problem," Cross says later as he lets go of Jolene's forehead. Wisps of blue magic dance around her eyes. Cross can wipe memories, a useful solicitor skill for setting up contracts that the person who signed doesn't even remember. Even more useful to them right now is that he can use the same skills to go digging for memories in the positions. Cross stumbles when he steps back toward Barry. He's been doing battle in Jolene's mind, no doubt. And Cross, injured, has had to fight to get something. "Plans?" Barry asks. Cross sits down on a chunk of rubble. After pushing aside an old termite-filled wooden beam, he takes a deep breath. Barry glances at Jolene. She's tied up and after Cross's magic in no mood to talk. Her eyes are glazed and distant. He's a little impressed. She's a short, heavily muscled Riveteer and she has almost killed them both. "They abducted her from her own apartment," Cross says, "forced her into being an Obscura agent for working for the Riveteers." "So?" Barry confused. "We can still get the plans, wipe her memory and go back to Falco, right?" Even as he says it, he knows it won't be that simple. He's just trying to get Cross to reassure him that everything's going to be alright. Obscura made a point of knowing everything that was happening. They've been trying to figure where Halo is going missing and it led them to Riveteers working on construction for us. They've been feeding Riveteers false information, saying that brokers have been hurting their workers. We dump what seems like yet another beaten up Riveteer on the streets. With their memory wiped, we start a war. Cross leans back against the pillar wall and closes his eyes. This is all a trap. She's the bait. The Obscura know that Falco's hoarding Halo. The stuff is almost currency at this point. Some of the other families had to start sniffing about shortages in the city, but Falco wasn't expecting it to happen this soon. They figured out what they're doing, but they don't know why. They're trying to knock us back into our place, Cross says. Obscura thinks that they're the heirs to the city just because they know everything. They're always trying to make sure everything remains the same. Arrogant idiots. "What do we do?" Barry looks at Jolene. Falco said. "I know what Falco said." Cross covers his face with his hand. "But we do that, we launch a war between the Riveteers and us." "Isn't that what Falco wants?" "No, he wants to show that a contract is a contract. He's not ready for war. Not yet. It's still too early." Test, test, test. Test, test, test. Test achteruit. Test rechtop. Test naar voren. Test telefoon achteruit. Test naar boven. Test naar voren.
Never be as sweet as a kiss from you tonight. Oh no, top of the line. Our favorite love songs play on repeat.
Isn't that what Falco wants?
And you're just in time. I waited all my life.
There's a larger plan in the air, something Perry's not privy to. He's never been told why Falco's fanatically hoarding as much Halo as the brokers can get their hands on, but he can feel the pieces moving about. And he sees the empty spaces. It's something big, whatever it is, maybe even historic. They've hidden a lot of Halo. A war with the Riveteers will destroy everything we've been working toward, Cross says. It's the Obscura we need to be worried about. We go and tell Falco, Barry nods. Falco ordered us to do a job, Cross responds. Barry stares a moment. Even if you, of all people, Cross shouts, should know how absolute your instructions are with Falco. And Cross wouldn't risk his spot at the top of the organization. Barry's still shocked. People will die if we start a war. A lot of people. He imagines whole buildings falling, explosions, fights in subterranean caverns, teams of Riveteers bursting out of walls or ducts to kill them. Because it won't be brawling for territory, the bosses will play for keeps. Falco would need a general then, a master tactician. It would be a way back into Falco's good graces. Art by Karen Jenner. But a lot of innocent lives would get caught in the crossfire. Barry sighs and stands up. You are too hurt to travel. Stay here with the Riveteer. I'll send someone back to help. Barry, you can't go back to Falco empty-handed. Barry laughs. How many lives will I save if I do? Cross looks at the ground. You're risking your life. You understand that, right? I know, Barry says. I know. Barry still has a wobble in his step and the after-image of Rigo's transportation magic in his eyes when he's shoved into Falco's office. The corridors here brim with brokers getting ready for a war. Everything's packing magical heat, and they're all jumpy. If the streets are as wound up as this, all it will take is a single wrong glance, an ill word, and the Riveteers and brokers would slash each other's throats. I see no plans, I see no cross, Falco growls. The hand-carved doors to the balcony are wide open. The swooping buttresses of other buildings loom in the night outside, and alabaster gargoyles glare across at Barry, who can probably become alive. He swallows. Is Cross alive? Falco turns his back and looks out at the heights. He's making his way back with the Riveteer Jolene. Barry faced off against some of the most dangerous people in New Capenna. Right now, he's afraid that if he breathes too deeply, it'll disturb Falco, so he's holding his breath. Falco's voice drops several octaves. But no plans. It was a trap. Barry lets out a deep breath. Slowly, strategically. We can get the plans back, but they aren't as important as we really stole them. As important as who really stole them. Sorry. Falco still has his back to him. He flutters his wings, and the snapping crack startles Barry. Obscura? Falco asks. How did you? Barry should know by now that Falco has his ways. Falco steps out onto the balcony, out into garish light of Park Heights. The city glitters out below him from there. Take a step outside into the fresh air with me, oh no. Barry's been relieved of his hammer and knuckles, but he still has brawn, and that isn't much against a boss like Falco. He thinks as his shoulders slump. Oh no. Barry tentatively crosses the threshold and stands on Falco's balcony for the first time in his life. Falco spreads his wings slightly to let the air ruffle his feathers. He closes his eyes. Do you know some people who join me out here are so overcome with emotion, Falco says, that they sometimes slip and just fall right off the edge? Barry's not sure what to say to that. Is he being threatened? Is he about to join them? He'd do his best to take the bus with him. He knew that for sure. But Falco isn't acting like... It's a bird. Falco isn't acting like someone about to move against him. Don't worry, Barry. Your mind isn't that weak. People don't realize you're a tactician, but I've seen you in action. Falco smiles over his shoulder. You're no one's fool. Falco leans against the railing and waves his hand at all new Capenna. He looks. Barry thinks, for the first time, tired, ancient. Adam Paquette again, it's amazing. There's war coming, Barry. All this, every solicitor, every pact we bound someone to, all that halo we have been hiding away across the city, it's just preparation. I'm going to need you in the days ahead, but we have a loose end dangling between us. Barry lets out another deep breath. The boy? No one can break a contract. Falco folds his arm behind his back. No one. There are smaller sacrifices we must make if we're to save the city. You know how this works. You left those two Leonin bouncers looking at the sky earlier because you saw the bigger picture. Take your step up into leadership or... The oar dangles in the air above the balcony, much like Barry assumes he will, shortly. Barry looks at Falco in the eye and shoves his hands into his pockets. Falco stands on the edge by the railing, arms behind his back, vulnerable. Almost taunting Barry. Try it, the broker boss seems to be saying with his body language. All Barry's ever wanted is right here. He can agree that the boy broke a contract and deserves the same punishment as any other citizen of New Capenna that crosses the brokers. He does that, Falco's dangling a promotion in front of him. Join the inner circle to help the boss fight a war he's been planning for many long years. Or defy Falco and go flying, with no wings. I stand by that, what I said last week, Barry says slowly. There's words on paper that you sign and agree to. And then there's what's right. The boy broke his contract, but he was just a scared kid, trying not to get stepped on by either organization. If the child had done what I'd asked, you wouldn't have been down under the city getting made a fool of by the Obscura. Falco hisses. If he'd done his job, we'd likely be a step ahead, instead of stuck with a mess and possibly bloodshed. Likely, Barry repeats. Likely. Falco carefully folds his wings back and takes a step forward. Is it worth winning anything if we have to harm children to do it? Barry steps forward as well, hands still in his coat pockets. He looks up at Falco with defiance. Because it isn't to me. I have brawlers, Falco says. I don't need more. Barry waits, as stony and still as a statue as the gargoyles staring at them from the other building's facade. I have tacticians smarter than you, many of them, Falco continues. Then use them, Barry snaps. Falco laughs. He turns abruptly to stalk back inside his offices. I need something different of you, Barry. I still need you to go see that boy for me. I still need you to protect broker reputations, or everything we build falls apart. Barry opens the car door, and the orphan in the raggedy clothes stares at the ornate building they've pulled up in front of. Will I be locked in a room again, he asks mournfully. Barry puts a hand on his shoulder. No. A small door in the brick facade opens. A woman in the all-black uniform of a warden waves at Barry, and he hustles the child in front of him. They both look around the streets to see if anyone noticed. All clear, the woman says. I'm scared, the boy whispers to Barry. Before you came for me, Yomu said you were going to hurt me, badly, for crossing the brokers. Tears slide down the kid's grubby cheeks. He's terrified, shaking in his scrap boots. Barry notices pieces of paper stick out near his ankles. The kid has no socks. Just go with this nice lady, you'll be safe. This is a safer place for orphans like you. It's a school. I'll visit. I'll be by tomorrow. The lie hurts Barry. The boy takes off the oversized flap cap from his curly hair and gives it to Perry. You should have this, for helping. I won't need it, now, I guess. They'll never let me near papers. Did the rhino wear the cap? I think so. The woman in all black puts a soft, friendly arm around the boy, and he lets himself get moved into another room past the vestibule. Several older women in black gowns swoop into the doorway after them. A flash of radiance lights the room, and Perry sees the circle of black-dressed figures surrounding the child like a flock of ravens. The light fades, and the first warden returns to Perry. It's done. He passes her a parcel tied off in a brown twine. Thank you, warden. He won't remember a thing before today, the warden says. We'll take good care of him. They had to. They had a contract with the brokers now. A boarding school for the Park Heights elite might not know too much about the shadowy streets, but even up here, they would know better than to break a contract. Barry slides into the back seat of the car. What I need right now, Barry, Falco had said, back as Barry re-entered the room from the balcony, is neither a brawler nor a planner. Barry pulls his hammer out from under his coat. He looks at the unsuspecting, dapper people out and about their day as the driver takes him toward a street with obscura. The first of what Falco suspected were many scuffles over territory in New Capenna in the next month. At least the riveteers are staying out of it, thanks to Perry's work. What I need, Falco had said intensely, is a conscience. The car, beetle black skin absorbing New Capenna's lights, slides past the hustle and bustle of the city with Barry inside. Outside, those in the know whisper, there goes a broker enforcer, one of the most dangerous ones. Barry looks down at the cap in his hand thoughtfully, then he slides it into one of his inner coat pockets, right next to a shattered old watch he never leaves without. Let's jump to the beginning. No, he's not. Okay. But he does wear his monocle. And maybe it's in his pocket somewhere? No, it's not either. That would have been cool. But still a cool story. Thank you for watching, and bye.